Before 1492, somewhere between 50 and 100 million people lived in the Americas. They had cities, trade routes, agriculture, governments. This was not empty land waiting to be discovered. Your nation had a name for itself, a language, a history going back thousands of years, a relationship with this specific land that was older than any European country that was coming to claim it. Everything you knew was specific to this place. Which plants healed, which seasons brought which animals, which rivers flooded and when. Knowledge that took generations to build. The nations traded with each other, made alliances, had conflicts, made peace. The political complexity of North America before contact was not a simple thing that simple people made. Your history lived in the voices of the elders. Every story a map, every song a record. The library was the people, and the people had been keeping it for thousands of years. The ships appeared on the horizon in 1492, and nothing that came after was part of any story anyone already knew how to tell. The Europeans brought diseases the Americas had never seen. Smallpox, measles, typhus. Your immune system had no history with any of them. No defense built over generations. Nothing. Some villages lost 90% of their population before they ever saw a European face. The disease traveled faster than the people who carried it. It arrived as a warning nobody could read. When the elders died, the libraries died with them. Languages that had no written form disappeared when the last speakers did. Histories that existed only in memory ended in an afternoon. 90 million people reduced to 10 million in 2 centuries, not primarily by war, primarily by biology, an invisible force that the Europeans didn't fully understand themselves, and some of them used deliberately when they did. The colonizers arrived to find land that looked empty. It was empty because the disease had just cleared it. They called it Providence, God making room. They wrote that down in their journals with genuine gratitude. A man plants a flag and says, "A king you've never heard of now owns the land your nation has lived on for 1,000 years. The flag stays. The king never comes. The settlers do." The treaties were written in a language you didn't speak about a concept of land ownership your culture didn't share. You signed anyway because refusing had consequences, and keeping the agreement was never fully the other side's intention. Every treaty had an expiration, not a written one. Just the practical one that came when settlers wanted the next piece, and the government found a reason why the previous agreement no longer applied. There were over 500 treaties. The United States broke every one. Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830. It made legal what had already been happening illegally for 2 centuries. The eastern nations had to go west. The land they were standing on was needed. The Cherokee called it Nuna Dal Tsuni, the trail where they cried. 4,000 people died on the walk west. The Supreme Court had already ruled the removal unconstitutional. Andrew Jackson ignored the ruling. Nobody stopped him. The Plains nations fought. They had been fighting for 2 centuries by the time the U.S. Army reached the Great Plains. They were not confused about what was happening. They had watched it happen to every nation east of them. Little Bighorn, 1876. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse led the largest gathering of Plains warriors ever assembled and destroyed Custer's command completely. America was shocked. The Lakota had seen it coming for a generation. The Army knew what the buffalo meant. General Sherman said it directly. kill the buffalo and you kill the Plains Indian way of life. 60 million buffalo reduced to a few hundred in 20 years, on purpose. Wounded Knee, 1890. The Army killed 300 Lakota men, women, and children who were surrendering. The soldiers received the Medal of Honor. It was the last major military resistance of the Indian Wars. The reservation system took the nations that survived and placed them on the least desirable land available. Enough to live on, not enough to live the way they had lived. That was the point. Kill the Indian, save the man. That was the stated policy. Take the children, put them in schools far from their families, cut their hair, ban their language, punish them for speaking it, replace everything they are with something easier to manage. You arrive speaking your language. You are punished for speaking it. Within months, you are thinking in a language that is not yours. Within years, your first language begins to fade. That was the design. You go home and you don't fully fit there anymore. You go back to the school and you don't fully fit there either. The boarding school created a generation that belonged nowhere completely. That was also part of the design. The reservation provided just enough to prevent starvation and not enough to rebuild. Dependency was the architecture. Self-sufficiency had been the target all along. They did not disappear. Every generation that was supposed to be the last one wasn't. The languages that were almost killed are being taught to children again. The ceremonies that were banned are being practiced again. 500 years of systematic elimination, and the nations are still here, still speaking, still dancing, still passing the knowledge to the next generation. Survival at that scale is not luck. It is will. The land is still here. The people are still here. The stories are still here. 5 centuries of people trying to end all 3 of those sentences, and none of them are finished yet.